Good evening and hello everyone. We got a very awesome special for you. We got a little 3-in-1, maybe 2-in-1. But we're going to be talking about Berkeley Ford. What the heck is this stuff? Why should you care? And how is it actually? I'm guessing a lot of you clicked on this. You want the unbiased review. You want the unsponsored review. You want the real review. And I got that in store for you guys. And another thing, I want to update you guys in Fireline. This line's excellent. It's very similar to Forward, but not quite. So we're going to be doing a review and a head-to-head tonight. So let's waste no time and kick straight into it. So right off the bat, I just want to talk about Fireline a little bit. So Fireline has been around for a long, long time. It has been around since the mid-90s and such. But when it came out, it wasn't as nice as it is today. So what we have today is an 8 carrier formula, which is a good step ahead of what it used to be, where it used to be 4 strands wound together and thermally fused. What we have today is a continuation of the 2018 product, Fireline Ultra 8. After they did a second reformulation and also a new color palette update, they came out with the series of Fireline Thermally Fused Tough. Now, we've all known Fireline to be a very, very tough line to begin with. That's the whole purpose of thermal fusion, to add abrasion resistance and add a slick coating to add casting distance. But what I really want to talk about here is why is it that thermally fused lines, in a certain sense, are they superior to anything conventional? Like conventional, I mean by Power Pro, Spiderwire, J-Braid, and heck, even Suffix 832. So when you have a thermally fused line, essentially what they're doing is they are taking these filaments and they are going to be bonding them together with a heat treatment process that is going to make them all wind together in a single filament. So I really actually talk about thermally fused lines as more of like the actual true super lines of the market. And I wish I had a better example of a Durabraid, but I'll give you guys what I have here. So Durabraid is another thermally fused option. I only have a wad here because I was just despooling some line. But what this essentially is, it's a 4 carrier thermally fused line that is actually meant to be the competitor of Power Pro. That's why it was 25% stronger. That's why they marketed it as such. So, but again, why do we use thermal fusion? For a lot of people, they're using 1,000 to 2,000 size reel, and this is going to, kind of pan into the next subject where we get towards using forward. Most people I find that seem to struggle with lines that are thermally fused are usually using panfish size reels, and they're usually using a reel that's way too small. I know I have the camera a little bit zoomed in, but this is a 35 size Fluger. On industry standards, I would probably put this at a 3,000, realistically speaking. But what I want to highlight here is that with a lot of thermally fused lines, not because they have memory, but because they have body to them, you need a spool diameter that is going to accommodate that stiffness to the line. And when I mean that, every time that line comes off the reel, you need a spool diameter that is wide enough to dish out that line in even coils. Again, coils are not always the enemy here. It's really what was that when you have poor line management or a poor reel that cannot lay line evenly. Now, I'm not going to get into the specifics of this video. I understand the Fluger is not nearly as nice as the Abu, but I'm just using it, as a demonstration here. One of my favorite combos currently so far to be using forward with, or any thermal fusion line, I've been switching this out for a lot, is a 3,000. Each time that line will go around the spool, it travels a certain distance. And on smaller spools, the diameter being smaller, there is less distance for the line to have to travel, which in most cases is a better thing. But with these lines and just the nature that they are, they need a wider and longer travel distance to actually effectively cast long distances. So, that gets us into the realm of, really understanding the nitty-gritty of, what the hell are these actual, thermally fused lines. So fire line, great, smooth, abrasion resistant, sometimes can be a little bit stiff. Durabraid, very, very tough, surprisingly manageable, not nearly as complex of a thermally fused line, but still very good for bait casters. So, all right, this is gonna be the meat and potatoes, everything you guys came for. If you were wondering what you were actually looking for, I'm gonna put a timestamp at 5:30. So here we go. Berkley Forward, the hottest new braid on the market to hit probably since Fireline, at least from Berkley's side. Or maybe X5 took the place too. But either way, this stuff launched not a while ago. It's actually been pretty recent. And I was lucky enough to get my hands on a fairly early spool of this stuff. And do I still have the spool that I was going to use for demo here? I thought I did. I do. So, I just want to preface with this. So, Berkley Forward is nothing insanely new. It's fairly generic in like theory. But what Berkley have done here, which is a real shocker for a lot of people, this is not conventionally braided. This diagram really puts it together well, and in another explanation I'm going to be giving you guys. So Berkley Forward is not woven together. It is simply fused together and then heat treated and shrunk into a single, I guess, hyperfilament, or a true superline. I'll peel off a couple bits off the flame green to get a better example, because this stuff is magic. I really have been extremely impressed with this stuff, and I've gotten so picky with my lines at this point where, it's hard for me to like really get wow factored by many things anymore. But this stuff, not only is it stupidly thin, it resists rounding out, or it resists flattening out and stays rounder for much longer. I mean, you can see a little bit here, it got a little bit crinkled out, but that's because, I just took this off the rod. But other than that, it's retained its shape very well. I'd say the biggest headline so far everyone said about Forward is, increased sensitivity, increased sink rate, increased castability. I'm going to kind of break down, what they're talking about here. So with increased castability, again, I would put Forward as like a refinement of everything Fireline is not. Since they got rid of the classical braiding process, you end up with a line that behaves much closer to a monofilament in terms of casting ease and overall smoothness. Because fresh out of the box, this line, it is the smoothest braid I have ever felt. I can't even put this in the realm of like, 8, 10, 12 carrier. It's an infinity carrier. It's actually what it technically is. Because without any typical braiding process, it's just Dyneema. It's just all, these super fine filaments wound together or fused together. Another great way to explain how they're doing this is that they have this fused together in a candy cane fashion. So if you're kind of familiar with how, candy cane looks, it's kind of that spiral design. That's exactly what they're doing here. That's why this stuff is so smooth, so strong, and so thin. Braids have always been thinner than monofilaments or any kind of fluorocarbon for that matter. And Forward isn't the thinnest diameter braid, but it certainly is the slickest and farthest casting diameter braid. Again, they say it's a 3-pound mono equivalent. I'd say that's about true. I mean, I know Berkley have been a little all over the place with their claiming or was advertising on their reels, or, oh my goodness, their line. But I'd say this is about 0.15. I've played around with a lot of lines at this point. I kind of recognize what 0.15 actually feels like. And this is it. This is really something. Again, we're going to go on the next topic, sink rate. I know a lot of people have made a couple like buzz topic claims about, oh, this is a sinking braid. I'm going to put a yesant to that. It's not sinking in the matter of like a lead core or a copper core, but with a thin diameter and, again, most of all, the thermally fused coating, this stuff sinks a lot easier. a lot easier. It's not naturally sinking by itself. It is neutrally buoyant by itself, but it sinks a lot more willingly than anything compared to Power Pro, anything compared to Spiderwire, even Suffix, which I have wound onto this spare spool. I needed something to hold it for the time being. But I really do love the way this stuff works with the jig head. Again, when you first cast it out, it won't sink, but after it hits the water for like a split second, you see your line just starting to disappear underneath the surface, and it is just fantastic. Again, so cracking on to the final real topic, and then I'm just going to kind of go on to like a little jibber jabber ramble about what I think about it. Sensitivity. Again, we're going to go back to the construction and the actual, theory behind any kind of braid. Why are braids more sensitive? Braids are more sensitive simply because they have little or essentially zero stretch. I mean, I cannot stretch this out with my hands if I wanted to. And, when you put that with like a very high quality rod, like a Fenwick, an Abu, or any St. Croix, or really any good quality blank, this stuff only enhances that sensitivity further. With traditional braids, as you have that fraying and everything going on with the line, you start losing, not really sensitivity, but you start getting a little bit of slop in that line. And this line, with how abrasion resistant it is, I haven't felt a single bit of degradation. Again, with a little bit of flattening out, every thermally fused line is going to flatten out at a certain point. But, with the current state it's in, I haven't lost a single bit of that rigidity that, Fireline usually has right out of the box, which I personally do quite enjoy quite a lot. The sensitivity stays true, it stays honest, and it stays consistent. And that's not something I can really say for some other braids, because otherwise most braids, you get really the feel from the rod tip kind of just overloading. This, you can feel the line actually transmitting that bite back to your fingertips. I mean, if I just just even grabbing that line, I can feel that in my pinky and my ring finger. I mean, it's like so magical. Like I have the line slack, I can feel that. I can feel it right away. And that's Berkley's like biggest claim here, especially with thermally fused line. I didn't cover it, I should have before. But the biggest downer with a lot of braids, and even Suffix, yes, the good old like praise to Suffix 832, the biggest problem is that once you put any kind of slack into that line, your sensitivity's gone. It's almost completely nullified, or at least half of what it normally is. Because only when that line is tight or semi-tight, well, you get that perfect one-to-one feel. And that's why I'm not a huge advocate for any kind of slack line techniques on braid. I usually use mono or fluoro. But this is the first braid or super line that genuinely behaves like a mono or fluoro in terms of sensitivity over a slack line. And this is why they market it towards forward-facing sonar guys. Because when you are using forward-facing sonar, you might have a little bit of slack in the line. You might have a considerable bow in the line. And in that bow, you can still maintain a connection to that bait. And that is extremely important, especially for even a lot of us bank guys who are trying to feel a bite in, like 100 feet away when we have like our big 8-foot rods, just trying to make a cast to get to the good spots. So I hope you guys kind of enjoyed this one. I know it's a little bit of a shorter video. I actually want to hear from all you guys. Please input your, your comments, your experiences, thoughts, opinions, everything about this line. If anything, I could say this line is worth it if you are in need of a braid that has superior sensitivity, better abrasion resistance than even Fireline, and you just need a line that's going to cast stupidly far, and most of all, a braid that will not fade. I have used this line for honestly about 2 months now, and you can see it on the camera. It is just glowing bright as ever. And the same applies to the moss green. I have been running this one about for 3 months now, like since January, I think, when I first received an early spool. It's still dark green, and I usually don't see that on most green braids. They usually fade out. The flame greens usually turn white after a couple of weeks, but I have noticed zero color change so far. I mean, it might be mild, but it is so mild to the point where it's like I can't even notice it. Overall, for $30, I think Ford is going to be a fantastic line for people who need something ultra premium. Like, you need a line that is going to work with you and not against you. Again, I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear what you guys think about this stuff. I want to hear your opinions, whether they're good or bad, everything. I want to hear it. So I really thank you guys for watching again. If you made it to this part of the video, maybe consider liking, maybe consider subscribing. And I will catch you in the next one. Stay tuned and stay safe and tight lines. Skadoosh.